Welcome to This Club Sucks. Grief support for parents after the lasagnas are long gone. I am your host, Melissa Monroe, here with my co-host, Alexandria Seamock. Each week we record our child loss chat on Twitter Spaces, where we explore topics around grief and trauma. Whether you are a bereaved parent, want to support bereaved parents, or exploring other sources of grief, we'll be here holding space after the lasagnas are long gone. Oh, this club sucks. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Child Loss Chat. Each week we discuss topics around grief, trauma, and child loss. They are recorded for my podcast, This Club Sucks. Grief support for parents after the lasagnas are long gone. Today, I'm thrilled to have Candace Cahill on to discuss her new memoir, Goodbye Again, which comes out next Tuesday. Congratulations, Candace. Would you like to introduce yourself to everyone?
Yes, thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you for having me on the space here. My name is Candace Cahill, and I currently reside in Denali, Alaska for over 25 years. My memoir, which is titled Goodbye Again, comes out next week, and it is about losing my son twice. The first time to adoption as an infant, and then 23 years later, he died in his sleep, and we had only got a chance to meet one time in person. I had that one opportunity to hold him in my arms, which is continues to be like the best day of my life. But my story is about all the complexities of the grief that were connected to relinquishment and to the adoption itself. And I really didn't learn the extent of it until he passed away. Having to deal with the grief of his death forced me to also deal with the grief of his relinquishment, which I had completely dissociated from. And so having to go through basically the double loss was just a very difficult experience. It's been almost 10 years now, so I feel like I'm a much further along in my healing journey. We use that term healing journey, which is, I think, sometimes overused, but it does work in this case. Yeah, so that's kind of the basic story.
It's a heartbreaking story, and I've had the privilege to read the book already, and it'll just break your heart and put it back together. I really had to work through my own feelings of rage towards your ex-boyfriend and his parents and your parents. And I was wondering, as I read it, how long it took you to get to a place to not resent those people. It sounded to me in the reading like you were pretty much strong-armed into relinquishing your son. And I just wonder how long it took you to sort of, I think it would be easy to feel resentment and understandable. And I wonder how long it took you to work through that, if you don't mind talking about that.
Yeah, I definitely agree that I was strong-armed, and that there was, quite a bit of coercion and manipulation to convince me to willingly relinquish my rights to my son. I don't know, when it comes to my ex-boyfriend and his family, whether I have actually gotten to a place where I forgive them. I don't feel like I have to. I don't have contact with them. I, haven't seen them since before Michael was born. With my family, particularly with my mother, it took me a long time to get to a place where I could both accept the fact that she wasn't capable of being the mother that I wanted her to be, um, to accept that, but also have the willingness to engage in a relationship with her. Um, it was, I mean, early on in during right after the relinquishment and in the early years of Michael's life, I, again, just dissociated from it all. Anytime I did talk to my mother was very brief. We barely, what's the word? We really didn't have much of a relationship at all. And I was okay with that because I just couldn't be around her. What she had said to me after I relinquished my son really hurt me deeply. And so after that, there just wasn't any room for us to really have an intimate relationship. I needed to keep her at arm's length, really just to protect myself. Then, as I got older, or maybe more mature would be the word. I continued to keep myself away from her because I knew that she was toxic in a lot of ways. But it wasn't until my son died that I was able to find a place where I could engage in a relationship with her. And I think it was because the worst had already happened. There wasn't anything worse that could happen. So she didn't have the ability to hurt me anymore. Um, I don't know, I don't know that we would have been able to develop a relationship if my son hadn't died, if that makes sense.
It does. Um, I've spoken to my daughter, also died in her sleep of unexplained, unknown causes, as you know. And I'm active in the SUDC community, which is not every SUDC kid died in their sleep, but the vast majority of them did. The children who did not die in their sleep, their parents kind of describe it in a way, no one said it just like this, but it just kind of sounds like they were unplugged. They were talking 1 minute and then collapsed silently and were gone. Um, so I understand the unexpected, unexplained death and how I too felt like nothing worse can happen, really. Like Maureen Neiman, who was on here a few weeks ago, described feeling bulletproof afterwards. Um, there's nothing, that there was nothing that could touch her. So I absolutely understand how you would feel that way. And I think it's beautiful that you were able to get to a place of, if not forgiveness, just accepting your mom for who she was and being able to be there for her when she died was a very generous act that you describe at the end of your book. I would like to ask you a couple questions about the years between relinquishing him before you met him. It was a long time. I believe you heard from him right after his 18th birthday. But 18 years is a long time to wonder what might happen, wonder if you'll have a relationship. You did have an open adoption, and I believe you said yours was one of the first ones in Minnesota. I'm just wondering how you got through those 18 years. It's a really long time to not know whether you'll be able to meet this person. And though I know you had an open adoption, so it seemed like you had a better chance than many, that's a really long time to try to kind of rationalize a very legitimate grief that you were experiencing due to relinquishment. Did I? That was a very long-winded question, but hopefully you understand the gist of it.
Yes, I do understand the gist, and you may need to rein me back in or make sure that I answer it to the best, or at least to your satisfaction. Um, so first of all, the part of the strong arming, the coercion that took place in order to convince me to willingly sign over my parental rights. Part of that was they, as in the adoption personnel, the professionals, they couched it. They couched open adoption as the like the best way to be able to stay in contact. So like they said, this is how you can make sure that your child is going to be well taken care of. You can pick the parents, you'll get updates once a year with letters and pictures, and so you'll have proof that the people that do take over are going to be are going to do the job that they say they're going to do, and at the same time they'll be much better than you because, well, you're poor and you come from a bad family, and you don't have the skills, etc., etc. And there's two of them and they're wealthy and they're perfect and all of these things. So it was all done in such a way to convince me that A, I wasn't good enough, and B, other people were. Now the open adoption um, wasn't it's not like it is today, and there's a lot of things about adoption that are wrong, the vast majority, if not everything, in my personal opinion. But the the whole idea of openness and adoption, when I went through this was in 1990, all that meant was exchanging letters and pictures through the agency as a third party, so that we couldn't there was no way for me to know who they were, um, know their last names, etc., where they lived. So it was meant to protect the adoptive family from incursion of the birth family. So, uh, but it was dangled in front of me as a way to know what was going on. Now, the the only way that I was able to do that was by thinking about that, by having contact, having or having proof that he was okay. And those first few years of getting those updates, they basically allowed me to kind of cordon off the grief, to keep it confined within this very specific pattern. It was basically like a ritual that I had, where I would get an update, I would seclude myself in a room, I would go through the letters and the pictures, I would give myself permission to grieve, and then I would turn it off and dissociate again and put everything, and literally I had it in the bottom drawer of my dresser drawer, and I'd tuck all of that away. And I wouldn't take it out again until either A, I got another update, or B, something triggered me, something made me need to look into that. So triggers were birthdays, Mother's Day, holidays. Anytime I felt a need to have proof that he was okay, I would pull out all of these pictures and all these updates and read them again. And I did that for years, and that was how I coped, was by literally sectioning off portions of myself, so that I wouldn't be vulnerable to people. Um, the When the updates stopped, which they did when he was 8, and I had no recourse because I had signed away my rights, and although they had implied that the family would be required, that this was like a contract, they would be required to send me updates. That was not the case. When I went to the agency when he was 8 and said, you need to contact them and tell them they need to send the updates, they're like, no, we don't. You signed away your rights. You don't have any choice in that. So I didn't have any recourse. So when I got between that point, between basically age 8 till he was 18, when I got the next update, it was, there were times where I would just be completely lost. And usually what I would do is seclude myself. Although my husband, who I got together with when my son was 6, he knew about Michael, he knew about the adoption. He was incredibly supportive all the way through, and continues to be to this day. But I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't know how to process what was going on, because I had continually been told and believed that adoption is beautiful, that my choice, quote unquote, choice to relinquish my son and place him for adoption was a beautiful thing, that I was brave, that I was selfless. So there was this there was this cognitive disconnect that was going on where, yeah, all of this stuff is supposed to be wonderful and beautiful, but I feel horrible that nobody was recognizing that. And because it wasn't being recognized, I literally secluded myself and did it all by myself. And I have talked to hundreds of other first parents that have experienced the exact same thing, that they were convinced and came to believe that they should be happy. They should be happy that they gave away their kids. They should be happy that their children are going to have this beautiful, wonderful life, because that's what we're told and that's what we're convinced. And particularly for someone like myself and other young women, you're young, you're immature. Many come from backgrounds where they've been manipulated and hurt and abused. So they're already vulnerable to being preyed upon. And that that is one of the best ways that I can describe when I look back now, is I felt preyed upon, and I was easy pickings and easily convinced to go along with, that the adoption is beautiful trope, and that I was doing the best thing for my son. Now, he had a wonderful family. He had grew up with a wonderful family. He had a wonderful life. His family now, we're very, very close, um, and we have a beautiful relationship. So it just because there's I guess there can be beauty in adoption. There can be beauty in adoption, but we need to remember, everyone needs to remember, that any adoption begins with the severance of a child from everything they've ever known. And that is often not only forgotten, but ignored and brushed under the table. So I'm hoping I addressed your long question, Melissa.
You did, and it makes me want to go to war for you, and many other people. It's yeah, I'm a little speechless right now, and your book describes this all so beautifully. I really encourage you all to get it. It comes out next Tuesday. It's called Goodbye Again by Candace Cahill. The I think that's a really important point in any sort of grief. Telling someone, no matter what the source of the grief is, how to look on the bright side, how to find their silver lining. I write about this a lot in my own book, is so toxic and so poisonous and so it's beyond not helpful. And it is absolutely it's hurtful, and in my opinion it's poison. However, most of the people who try to help quote, help the bereaved find the silver lining, see the beauty in it, etc., are not horrible people. It's just what they've been taught. They don't know what to do, they don't know what to say, they probably don't even know how to sit with their own difficult feelings. It's hard for them to see anyone else experience their difficult feelings because they can't handle their own. And I hate most catchphrases for anything traumatic or grief, like you said with healing journey, grief journey. Even within hours of my daughter dying, the term grief journey, and when I realized that I had a quote grief journey, I literally wanted to do the Archie Bunker raspberry. I was like, oh God, now I have one of those things that people are going to start throwing around because, their favorite mascara went out of line. Oh my gosh, I'm so triggered because I so I totally know what you mean there. But when we push a silver lining on someone else, it's toxic. And if I never get another message through to humanity, I hope it's that one. It's never, ever, 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 ever our place to point out, suggest someone else's silver lining or a way for them to find the beauty in it. It's not our place to even suggest it. It's not our place to even suggest that they do it. They will do it. They will do it, and they will get to it when they get to it. And until then, if you are actually their friend, if you actually care about them, you will sit there with them in their difficult times. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Candace, so let's move ahead, unless you have something you wanted to add about uh, me going off the rails
I
there.
no, that was great, but I do have something to add, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
So when I went to quote unquote counseling when I was pregnant, I got tricked into going to counseling at an adoption agency, essentially, which I didn't know that's what it was until I was already there. But regardless, I ended up staying there because the woman that was the counselor was she was amazing. She was wonderful. She was kind. She was thoughtful. She became the mother that I didn't have. And I still, when I look back on her and our relationship, I think fondly of her. While at the same time, now in my 54-year-old body, I look back and say, some of the things that she did were not okay. But she didn't know that. What you're saying is that people don't know, they don't understand, and they end up causing more harm than causing good, that was her intent. She thought by convincing me to give away my son that was the best thing for me and for my son. She thought that. She truly, honestly believed that. So my new goal in life, I'm going to change the world, and it's going to be to make people understand that that is not, giving away your child or convincing people to give away your child is not, does not help. That does not help anyone. And yeah, so that was my quick addition to what your little TED talk. So
Amen. I will help you with that. So you go through years of kind of having to fragment that grief, convince yourself he's better off, convince yourself you weren't good enough anyway. This is also horrible. It literally hurts my stomach to talk about it. Um, so I can't imagine what it was like to live like. So you go through that for 18 years, and then you get a letter on his 18th birthday. And so I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about finally hearing from them and realizing why you hadn't heard from them, which is a whole nother heartbreaking story in its of its own.
yes, yeah, it is. So first of all, receiving the letter, it was literally 2 days before his 18th birthday. I got an update, and I was thrilled, of course. Ran home and literally went straight back into the thing that I did when he was younger, which was seclude myself in my room, lay out the pictures, go through that. But what I discovered was his adoptive mother had committed suicide when Michael was 10. And so the fact that updates quit coming, although myself and his family haven't talked in depth about this, I believe it was because she was deteriorating into mental health crisis. And so the update stopped, and I believe that they did basically quit contacting me because they didn't know how to talk about it either. They didn't have any idea. Now, my reaction when I read this letter and discovered that his second mother had abandoned him, I thought that would kill me because I picked them. So now I chose poorly. Not only was it a horrible thing for me to have done to begin with, but I chose poorly, right? And so, but I had to, just like when I was younger, I had to block that. I had to block those feelings. I had to block even thinking about it because I didn't want to jeopardize this very tenuous early relationship that I was going to hopefully start with my son. So I literally blocked that out and focused instead on how to build a relationship. Um, and that the whole process of trying to build a relationship with someone that you've known for 18 years but haven't known for 18 years, um, the realization that I had missed out on everything, um, on top of trying to stay positive and finding ways to build a relationship. I mean, it compounded the difficulty so much. And um, I, with the help of my partner, and some really wise adult adopted people, I was encouraged to make sure that my son was the one who led the charge, was the one who made decisions on how our relationship would develop. So making sure that, because he was the only one in all of this that never had a choice. When the relinquishment and the adoption took place, he was the only one that never had a choice. So he needed to be the one that could be in charge of this. But I can tell you, as a mom, it just about killed me because all I wanted to do, as soon as I knew where he lived and where he was, is I wanted to drop everything, get on a plane, fly there, go to his house, grab him, and never let go again. And I couldn't do that. And I thought it would kill me. It didn't. I'm still here. But that was almost more difficult than having no knowledge of what was going on the 10 years previous to that. But I continued to believe that it was the wisest thing to do, to let him lead the relationship and make decisions on how we would move forward. Um, but there was a lot of grief around that. There was a lot of grief around, not being able to connect with him. When he died, um, it all of that grief was compounded because every time I thought about the future, because I think most people, when you lose someone, you're grieving for their loss, but you're grieving for the loss of the future. You're grieving the loss. Well, because we had just reunited and just met, I had some really grand plans. I had fantasies. I, I mean, there were so many things. My husband and I, we had all these things that we were hoping we could build together and we would do together, and we would travel and he would come to Alaska and all of these things. So all of that is now gone. But for me, it was compounded because there was also things like every time I thought about, you know, he loved Doctor Who, for example. And I looked forward to sitting down and watching Doctor Who with him. So when I grieve the fact that we'd never have a chance to watch Doctor Who, on top of that, now I'm also grieving the fact that I never got to watch anything with him. We never got to ever see a movie together or sit down on the couch together. Um, so every single piece of the grief was amplified because not only did I not have the future, I didn't have the past either. And when people would ask me, do you have children? When before he died, before we were reunited, there were many times I just ignored it or didn't answer because people would always say, if I said, "Oh yes, I have a son that I placed for adoption when he was an infant," their response was always, "Oh, that's so beautiful. That's so wonderful." That's not how I felt, but that was most often their reaction, right? I didn't feel that way, and I didn't want to hear that. So I would often just either ignore them or refuse to answer. When he died, now people ask me, it's like, "Yes, I have a son. He passed away." And everybody, automatic sympathy. "I'm so sorry for your loss," right? And I never got that when I placed him for adoption. That really should have been the first answer. or the first response, rather than, oh, how beautiful. Isn't that wonderful that you lost your son? um, and but on top of that, now we have, they ask if I have a son. My son died tragically, but I also relinquished him as a child, and so I've lost all of that. It's like I don't even oftentimes don't even know how to tell people and how to talk to people. But now I have this book, because and now I can just say that. It's become both a tool for me to be able to talk about all of this, as well as, I am hoping, an educational tool to teach people about the complexities of all of this.
Well, I commend you. It's also why I started writing. I couldn't tell the story again. I was very aware that telling the story over and over again in those early days was re-traumatizing me. It made me feel like I had my car wheels were in mud, just spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and wearing down the engine. And I was getting, not only was I not getting anywhere, I was getting in deeper. And because we didn't know why Alice died, everyone wanted to know, obviously. And I just couldn't talk. And so I thought, well, I'll write it down, and if they want to read it, they can read it. And if they don't, that's fine, but I can't say it again. And it was a tool for me. It was actually the very first reason that I wrote, was a tool, so I didn't have to keep saying it over and over again, because when people would come in, I could see all over their face that they cared, and they wanted to know, because they wanted to figure out how they could support. And I didn't want to uh, turn away that support, because I knew I needed it, but I couldn't keep going over the story over and over again. And I thought, well, I'll just write it down and then they can read it. So I totally understand how you can use that as a tool. And I do hope also that it will educate many people, because I'm sure all of us have at some point said something to a first mother or an adoptee that we felt was helpful that wasn't. So I want to go now to the when you find out he's passed away and you're in Alaska. It's not that easy to get out of Alaska. And just, can you tell us a little bit about that, if it's not too triggering for you?
Um, yeah, so we found out, it's it, now Melissa's, I think, the only one in this group that has read the book so far. So I found out why it was the 4th of July. Um, so I was literally dressed in a clown costume and getting ready to run a 5K race in my clown costume. And they had called and talked to my husband, um, and he came to get me. And so there, I hate the 4th of July now, pretty much the worst holiday ever. Um, and there's so much around that. But living at that time where I lived, which was Skagway, very remote. So to get out of Skagway, you have to fly or ferry from Skagway to Juneau. So if you're going to fly, it's about an hour. Ferry is about 6 hours. Well, when we learned that he had passed away, he had actually passed away 2 days earlier. So we didn't hear right away. And I know, I mean, I've never held that against them or anything. That wasn't like that at all. I know that they were struggling and dealing with so much grief themselves as well. But what that meant is we had less time to get there in time for the funeral, and getting out of Skagway is hard, because the flights are weather dependent. So if it's the weather's even remotely bad, you can't fly. You have to wait for a ferry, and like I said, ferries are like 6 hours, and then you've got to take a flight from Juneau to Seattle and Seattle to Minnesota. And it was, I mean, typically when we would fly out or go out for a visit to the lower 48, we're looking at least a 24-hour, because you have to lay over in all these places. The fact that it was 4th of July, there was no planes. The one tiny airline we had doesn't fly, so we had to find a independent, like a friend who had happened to have a flight, get us on a plane, get us down at Juneau, get Juneau to Seattle, Seattle, Minnesota. Anyway, we ended up getting there in less than 12 hours, and I look at it now as being um, it was fate that we were meant to be there in time, to be able to spend the time with his family. Um, the but during that entire traveling south, what was happening in my mind was, all the should haves, could haves, and would haves. All of the times I didn't try harder to reach out. Like I said, I had given him control over the relationship, but continued to think I should have reached out more often. Not to pressure, but just to let him know that I was there, that I was waiting, that I was available, that I was ready. And but just all of the should haves, could haves, and would haves played over in my mind. Now, when we got to his house, his adopted dad uh, totally welcomed me in, brought me into the house, me and my husband, and included us in everything in terms of the funeral services, the wake, all of it. And every single person that I was introduced to, I was introduced as his mom. I was introduced, this is Michael's mom. I wasn't his birth mom. I wasn't his first mom. None of that. This is his mom. And it totally, my internal messages were screaming and saying, "You don't deserve to be here. You're not his mom. You abandoned him. You gave him away." All of those things. But from the outside, they were all saying, "No, you need to be here. You are his mom. This is." They just really welcomed me in, and from that moment on, we have really shared the grief. And now, we're it's over almost 10 years now since he passed away, and I think from my perspective, they they hold everything that remains of Michael, all the memories, all the pictures, everything. They've got it all, and that's my access, and they are completely open and willing to share it with me. And I think from their perspective, although they haven't said it necessarily out loud, I am him. When I come to their family events or we see each other, I walk into the room and they see him because he looked just like me, just a big boyish version of me. And so we have this, it's like a symbiotic relationship almost, that we are giving to each other what we so desperately need, that remains of him.
Wow. Well, I'm really happy that they've treated you so well, and I'm glad that they have you as well. I want to open it up to any questions or comments that anyone might have. Does anyone have questions or comments?
I know that this is hard, personally. When I sharing my story and sharing, talking about these things, I have discovered that this is one of the hardest things for people to talk about. Um, and I'm guessing you have experienced similar, Melissa. Having lost, your toddler, and um, people just don't even know how to talk about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, it is. And what I told people when Alice died, when I saw them struggling for words, I just told them there are no words. Don't drive yourself crazy trying to come up with the perfect words, because there are none. I'm just grateful that you're here, is what I tried to let people know. Rachel, thank you for being here, Rachel.
Oh, sorry. I couldn't get the mute button off. So that's my day today. So thank you. It's so important to share these stories, Candace. I just bought your book. It's on my Kindle now. Um, And I think when we talk about uncomfortable truths, this definitely qualifies. Your spaces are difficult, Melissa, and I hear that from a lot of people when I run my sex abuse chat spaces. Even though we're not going into great detail and providing super explicit descriptions of what happened, it can still be, as you said, triggering. And I love that you are, asking Candace questions and saying, "Can you share if it's not too triggering for you?" And I think it's just so important that we give you that sacred space to talk about and tell your story. So sad and so sorry that you had to go through this. So just sending you love and would love to talk to you as well. We'll DM. Thank you.
Oh, thank you
Thank
so much, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel.
Okay, Candace. I now it's a few oddly we lost our children very close together. Michael died July 2nd, 2013, I believe, and Alice died 11 days after her birthday on August 6th, 2013. Both of them in their sleep, and I can't tell you how badly I wish we had something much different in common. I want to talk to you a little bit about the all of the different grief that came up when he died. I mean, you had so many things to grieve. You had an abusive childhood. You had um, a mother that did the things your mother did when you had to relinquish Michael. You had Jane's suicide. You had all of those years living in a kind of a state of suspended animation. You had all the would have, could have, should haves that all parents who lose children have. There were so many layers to the grief, and I wonder if you can talk to us a little bit about that because you touched on, I don't know if it was in our private conversation or in the book, but you, and I think it was you. It's been a week, so maybe it wasn't even you. But there's when you lose a child, there is this sense of, as we talked about earlier, nothing worse can happen, and you feel kind of bomb proof. But you also kind of think because nothing worse can happen, nothing else bad is going to happen. And that's almost never the case. My entire life blew up within 5 months of losing Alice. I mean, I really lost everything but my surviving daughter in a 5 month period. I know so many bereaved parents who have lost their spouse not long after losing a child. One of my friends lost her husband in a motorcycle accident right after they lost their child. I have a friend who lost her mother and brother within she lost her mother and brother to cancer within 3 months of each other. Meanwhile, her father had cancer. And so often the losses come quickly. And not all the losses are deaths, but major losses anyway. And that just sort of relentless pounding of losses is really agonizing. And I wonder if you can talk to us a little bit about how you manage that. I know your losses didn't come quickly together, but you had a lot of grieving that you hadn't done yet. And so I'm sure it felt that. I'm sure it felt just like a tsunami of different events coming down at once. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know for me, the fact that I hadn't dealt with the grief of his relinquishment um, played a huge role in how difficult it was to accept and deal with his death for sure. The you know I had spent so much of my life, and still in some ways continue to do this, dissociating and really trying to block out any of the bad feelings, and or even pretending that they weren't there. What ended up happening with Michael, there were a couple of things. So first of all, when when we were at the wake, So that which is typically it was the night before the actual funeral. When we were at the wake, I was completely inconsolable. Like I was like wailing for the vast majority of the wake. And there would be intermittent times where people would be introduced to me, and but I was inconsolable. I was completely lost. When I look back at it now, I was reliving the relinquishment as well as his death. It was happening at the same time because I hadn't really grieved when he was relinquished. I was now being forced to do it at the same time. So it was compounded, that devastation, the feeling of devastation, and that's the best way for me to explain it. As the months went on, it was very cyclic, or probably the better way is to look at it using water. Water is a great analogy tool, because there were times where it was like a tsunami, just completely pulling me out and then crashing down on me. But other times I would be just quiet, like a very soft river or creek, mellowly going by. But no matter the case, I was going along for the ride, and I didn't have the ability to really direct it anymore. I just had to go with it. And I, more often than not, I would be forced, because I didn't want to give in willingly. I really did not want to give in willingly, because I didn't want to feel it. I didn't. I wanted to keep it away. It wasn't until, and it was literally a specific day. I mean, it's completely in my head. It's in the book, and wasn't until a day that I literally gave in. I said aloud, I can't do it anymore. I am going to give in to the grief. And I fell to the floor and I howled, and I ended up in the middle of my bedroom, and I looked across the room when I was able to get my wits back, and we had a full length mirror. And what I saw when I looked in the mirror was the little girl of me. It wasn't adult me. It was this little girl who was completely devastated and lost and had no idea how to move forward. And what she needed is she needed a mother. She needed someone to come up, and the way I describe it is, what I envisioned is someone to come up and put their arms around me and, wipe the tears from my face and just hold me gently and let me cry. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to make it better. Just be there with me and recognize that I was destroyed. And I didn't have that. And what I realized in that moment was I had to figure out a way to do it for myself. That was, or find a way to ask for help. That's what I needed to do, because it wasn't going to happen all by itself. And it was recognizing that I needed compassion and care and loving, and I needed to allow people to give it to me and to give it to myself, was the turning point. And and as hard as that may have sounded, much easier to say than do. I was not good at showing myself compassion. I wasn't good at showing really anybody compassion, but I certainly wasn't good at showing myself compassion or kindness or any of those things, or giving myself a break for all the crap I did do wrong. But recognizing that even if I did things wrong in the past doesn't mean that I can't change now and I can't be a better person. And it also doesn't mean I don't deserve forgiveness. And realizing these things was such a monumental change for me. And the only way I could really move forward was to find tiny ways to do it, because it was too big. So the tiny things that I found were meditation. So I had read somewhere that if you meditate for 1 minute a day for 10 days, you'll notice a difference. And I was like, and I read it like 3 different places. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do 1 minute a day. And I sucked at it at first, but I tell you what, after 10 days, I actually felt better. I mean, it was tiny. It was, it was like that 10% happier book. It was just enough to make me say, I can keep doing this. And another powerful tool was, for some reason, I could always, always, always feel compassion to Michael's dad, his adopted dad. I never once did I not feel compassion for him. So I used, when I would think about trying to show myself compassion, I tried to visualize him, think of how I felt compassion for him, and then superimpose myself standing right next to him and try to expand so that I was showing myself compassion accidentally almost. And then another one was going in front of a mirror, looking myself in the eyes in the mirror, and as simple as saying, I love you. Now, for anyone who has never tried that, I encourage you to go do that. For me, I couldn't do it. I started bawling right away. I couldn't even say that to myself. It took years to get to where I can do it without crying. And even sometimes now I still cry. They're tiny little things, but that was how I had to do it. I had to take it super tiny steps. But yeah, so I don't know if that necessarily answers your question, but that was how I got through to this side. And I feel like I'm solidly on this side, and I'm so happy to be on this side.
And I'm happy you're on this side also. And I'm sorry that you had to find out about this side, but I'm glad that you got to it. A couple of things about what you just said. One is that I also want to emphasize how unhelpful it is for people to try to fix someone's grief. You can't fix it. You can't bring them back. Even if you could bring them back, there was still damage done by their loss. I mean, it's impossible anyway. But even if you could, even if someone could give me Alice right now, it wouldn't undo the damage of thinking she was dead for 9 years. There would still be damage. And I think that that's a real cultural thing, that people try to fix things for someone. Look, the grief is earned. The grief is what happens in the absence of, when you can't love someone up close. And that also doesn't mean that I want to wear my grief like a badge the rest of my life, but it has legitimate origins. It's nothing. It is a natural process. It is not a pathology. It is not a pathology. It is not a pathology. It is something to be supported, not something to be fixed. And that's another thing, that if I only accomplish one thing in my whole life, if I can get a few people to learn that you can't fix someone else's grief. You can't fix your own grief. You can only support it. You can support other people, and you can support yourself. And as Candace was describing, you can only eat an elephant one bite at a time. And so for me, I had committed to do 1 hour of self-care every day, because I thought, what would I tell my patients to do? I would tell them to do something for themselves every day. It doesn't have to be expensive. And if you don't have an hour, whatever amount of time you do. So I either took a walk, or I did therapy, or I took a bath. Water really helped me then and still does. So, as do trees. When my daughter grows up and I don't have to live in Los Angeles anymore, you're going to find me in the mountains by a lake, and I might never come back. Just a warning. I won't go Unabomber though. Don't worry. But every day I actually was very religious about it. I got a little off my schedule during COVID because COVID was so nuts, but it's how I ate the elephant one bite at a time. I meditated also. I wrote, but every day I did something, because it's too big. You're right. It's just too big. And people's reactions to it, though well intended, often make it bigger and harder to chew. And so that's something that has to be processed as well. So I just really commend you, Candace, and your book is so beautiful. Goodbye Again. I hope you all buy it and read it, and are educated by some of the things that she has to tell us. Candace, did you have any closing words before we wrap this up?
I will first of all say thank you so much for letting me come on and talk. I every time I share my story, um, I feel stronger. I feel more at home in my own body. Because I'm really embracing that part of me, and also it's so important. I think what you were saying. I'll just reiterate it. We can't fix somebody else's grief. I think the most important thing is to sit with them, just be willing to be with them and not change what they're experiencing. Sit with them, accept however their grief happens to manifest. And if that means they want to go out and, sliding in the snow, or they want to cry, or whatever it is, sit with them, be present, and let them know that you're not there to change them. You're just there to witness, to witness. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. That's a great point. I have a friend, Krista, and about 2 or 3 months after Alice died, she I was mainly friends with Krista, but I knew her sisters, and she told her sisters she was going to go see me, and her sisters said, "But what will you say? What will you do?" And Krista said, "I don't know. If she wants to rob a 7-Eleven and have me write the, uh, you know, oh God, I'm messing this up." She said, "If she wants to rob a 7-Eleven and have me drive the getaway car, I'll do that. I don't really care." And it made me laugh, and it also made me cry, because that's exactly the kind of thing I needed to hear. And my friend Maleva said something quite similar. Those two don't even know each other. She said, "I don't know. If she wants me to steal her baby's body from the coroner and take it to bury it in her childhood backyard, I will do it. I don't care." And that's the kind of friend you need. I did not hit an anger phase for a long, long time, so I didn't need to rob or hurt anybody. I still don't. But knowing, just hearing that was helpful. Knowing that they were willing to be there for me, no matter what I needed to do in that moment, was more healing than anything, really. And I will add to the sitting with someone. If you don't know what to do and you're someone that's uncomfortable sitting with that, that's okay. It doesn't make you a bad person. I would still say then trying to fix it for them is not helpful. And some of the other things we've been kind of raised to do are not helpful. But you can do actions. You can start a meal train for somebody, or give in kind, or um, see, if they're having car problems, take their car in for them, go to the grocery store for them, because someone in the fresh throes of trauma and grief isn't executive functioning that well, and definitely should not have to deal with the BS of everyday life for a little bit. So if you're someone that's not comfortable sitting with yourself or others during difficult emotions, but you want to show support, then you know ask what they need, or assess what they need, and action works too. But words are never going to fix it. So everyone, take a load off. There's no perfect words. So don't expect that from yourself. Candace, thank you so much. Your story is just heartbreaking, and I'm so proud of you for sharing it for your own good, and to help others see that adoption is not always this beautiful act that has no victims, and that first mothers are a lot of times not the what's the right word, that sometimes the first mother is as much a victim in the story as anyone. And I just really appreciate you sharing your story and coming on today. And I'm deeply sorry for your double loss of your beautiful son, Michael. And my heart is with you always.
Thank you, Melissa, and I to you. I'm so sorry for the loss of Alice, for you and your whole family.
Thank you, Candace. All right, everyone. I hope you have a beautiful week. I know today was probably a little rough, and I appreciate you being here. And I know it's more fun to talk about sneakers and celebrity gossip and the uh, jump in on political attacks and stuff like that. Oh, I appreciate you being here. These are the conversations that really matter in life, and I appreciate all of you for being here. And thank you, Dr. A, for co-hosting. Thank you, Rachel, for chiming in, and deepest gratitude to Candace for sharing your story. Big love, everyone.
Thank you for joining us today. For more information on the show or my other work, you can check out thisclubsucks.com or melissamarimonroe.com, or you can find me on Twitter at @MMeaning. May you experience some gentleness on your path today.